But I would say this in defense of the black guys at bloggingheads.tv race beat. The public discussion about racial issues is in such deep trouble. It is so hedged in. It's so delimited by a kind of cancel culture driven political correctness that there's just a desperate need for counterpoint. So we're doing a service, I think, by offering a platform where there is a sustained, coherent articulation of a counterpoint. And the fact that we're Black is absolutely essential to the effectiveness of that program. We'd already be canceled if we were white. Don't you think?
Ben, can I ask you something? Yeah. Actually, in relation to this, this is important. It's funny, right before we started today, I got a flash of an email, and it's an email that I'm realizing I'm seeing either as email or on Twitter daily, several times a day, which is that another way we need to mix it up is we need to have people on and have these friendly debates. People seem to really want that. And somebody wrote suggesting that we have somebody on who I am not going to name. It's a little too, we do too much of the ad hominem stuff. And so I'm not going to name who it is, but it's somebody we both know. And it's somebody who I know despises me. And I think a lot of people looking from the outside think that there are disagreements among Black academics that can be peacefully hashed out in a setting like this. And I don't think they realize that for an awful lot of Black academics, these things go beyond just disagreements about philosophy. These people think that we're scum, and therefore the idea there being a debate isn't going to happen. And on that, and I hope I'm not calling you out on this, but I have over my transom from last week something that you happen to have never said to me. Is it true that at Brown, when you teach courses on race issues, that Black students tend not to take the courses, and that you have on good authority that it's because other Black professors at Brown tend to tell the students to steer clear of you because your views aren't the proper ones? Because if that's true, I want you to say so, because it'll demonstrate to some of the people out there sitting and peacefully wondering why we don't have more people like that on the show, how deeply despicable our views are to a great many thoroughly reasonable people who write real books and real articles, who I think a lot of these people think would just civilly come onto the show with a cup of coffee and debate us when, as far as they're concerned, we stink. Is that true about Black faculty at Brown?
I want to be very careful how I respond, because there's what I believe and then there's what I know. Okay, so let me tell you what I know. Two things. One is I know that my courses on race, for example, the course I'm teaching right now, Economics 1070, Race, Crime, and Punishment in America, which has 80 or so students subscribed, has a statistically low representation of Black students in it. That is statistically low relative to the proportion of Black students who are in the student body. Whatever that number is, let's say it's 10%. I don't know the number offhand, but it'll be something like that. There are fewer than 10% of my students in that course who are Black, but also low given the subject matter, because, you know, race, crime, and punishment in America.
It should be half Black. Yeah.
Taught by a Black professor. Let me just observe, there aren't so many of us in the economics department teaching such courses. I'm the only one. And on a campus where there's keen interest in the subject matter, just let the police commissioner from New York City try to give a lecture on this campus and see how students react. So it's not like people are not interested in the subject matter. So it's an underrepresentation. It's a significant underrepresentation. It is significant both in numerical terms, but also in terms of the substance of the class. We need a robust number of African-American students in the class in order for the discussion of these questions that we are taking up to be as vital as it should and could be, to be as pedagogically enriching for everybody concerned. We need it to have like, so that's too bad. Too bad that they're not coming to my class in numbers any greater than they are, in fact, coming. So that's one thing I know. The other thing I know is that when I took aside a Black student with whom I had become friendly, who was taking my class, this is a couple of years ago, and who would come up to the front of the room when we were allowed to actually meet students in rooms. And,
I missed that.
Yeah, so do I. And you know, hang with me for 15 minutes if I had the time after class, arguing with me because he disagreed with pretty much everything that I was saying, but he could tell that he was learning something in the class because what he believed is what every other class that he had been taking had been saying in monolithic fashion, and he had never had to have an argument. This is John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill teaches us that even if we know the truth, if we never have to face an argument contrary to what we believe to be true, we'll know the truth as dead dogma, not as a living knowledge. We'll know the truth as incanting a mantra, not knowing the truth in terms of being able to articulate why what we believe to be true is true. So this young man could recognize that I was enriching him, not changing his mind, but making him sharper witted at being able to articulate why he believed what he believed. And he appreciated me. And I said, yo, young fella, this is a brother from the hood in New York City. Where are your fellow students?
Where are your
Black
friends?
Students?
Yeah.
He said, oh man, the word is out on you. The word is out on you. You know, your Uncle Tom. I mean, the word is out on you. I mean, and people. So now that's two things. One of it is student culture. The kids are in a clique in terms of racial identity within the student body. And if you took Loury's class, they're going to, you know, look at you askance because you took Loury's class. You come back, well, Professor Loury said this, and, you know, then you're in bad odor with your students. But it also probably, and this is what I don't know, but suspect to be true, reflects what some of my prominent colleagues, who will go unnamed here, of course, have to say to students when they come for consult. Well, I'm thinking about what I should be taking next semester. Should I take this or should I take that? I imagine that they are not being consulted. Oh, yeah, you got to hear Loury. You got to hear Loury. Loury's one of the most prominent people talking about these things. You are brown. You're interested in race and Afro-American studies, and you haven't heard from Loury? You can't leave here without hearing from Loury. Somehow, I don't think that speech is being given, okay, by the unnamed colleagues who I won't name because I won't name them. But I don't know that. I have not overheard it. I don't have a microphone in the office when the conversation is taking place. So there's what I suspect, and I don't want to slander my colleagues, but let me put it this way. I'm not having any constructive conversations with my colleagues about these matters either. I mean, I and we are tearing it up, not only on social media, but also in print and elsewhere, raising deep questions. I hope they're deep questions, interesting questions. Other people's responses tell me that they're interesting questions around the very issues that many of my colleagues of color and otherwise who are progressive on the race questions are deeply concerned about. Do I get a letter saying, I read your piece and I thought it was right, wrong, indifferent, or whatever. Here's a counter argument or whatever. Let's have coffee and discuss or whatever. No, I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. I got a life. I'm good. But no.
Yeah. See, now I want our audience to just take that in, because I can see that if you don't know the tenor of that, you listen to me and Glenn here talking. Yes, I know Glenn and I. Listen to Lexicon Valley and you'll learn why that rule doesn't make any sense. Right. Me and Glenn are sitting here talking and it's just
I'll bet you in sentences with prepositions sometimes too, don't you, John?
All the time. I like to. But we're sitting here talking and we're talking down these various people and we never bring anybody else in. I hope you know that in a different world, we would be more inclined, but that a lot of these people would not, sit and write back, oh, yes, let's come discuss, race and crime. Let's discuss George Floyd. Those people would never come anywhere near us. And I'm not saying that as a boo-hoo sort of thing. This has been my reality for 25 years now. I can't imagine it any other way. Believe me, I've moved on. I'm telling you this because given what you just heard about how Glenn is seen, the word is out on you, et cetera. You have to understand that there's certain debates that just could never happen. And it's not that Glenn and I are closed to it. Me and Glenn are closed to it. It's that. So we end up sort of fashioning the debate by sort of bringing up the specter of the person and arguing their points. And that must look kind of like we're using them as piñatas. But yeah. And so that email that I got this morning, I thought, with all due respect, does this person really think that that person would have anything to do with us? The person in question is somebody who on NPR once spoke to me very sharply. It is a very, NPR cozy kind of conversation. The Saturday Night Live skit about the air of NPR with the people with their hands over these mugs and, the big sweaters, et cetera. This is NPR. And at one point I said a little something and this person, spoke sharply, just for a bit, but spoke sharply. It was really not needed. And I just kind of tried to ride over it. And later that person excerpted exactly that exchange on their website. They were proud of it. So that person isn't going to debate us. That's just not the way these things work. So here we are. And it's just Glenn and me. And I hadn't known that, Glenn. And I just wanted to hear you say it. Somebody told me, and I thought, wow, is it that bad? It's probably that way with me too. I don't know definitely, but there must be some of that. So yeah, people are very emotional about these things. It's not just intellectual, there's emotion in us too. So I just want to get that out there.
I don't think it's only a characterological issue that people are in some way or another childish, not sufficiently mature.
I don't mean that
intellectually. No. I mean, I think there's a structural thing that goes on here because we are the black guys. And if you're making an argument against affirmative action, against reparations, against critical race theory, an argument that in any way is supportive of something that conservatives might be inclined to say about one thing or another. If you're singling people out, Nicole Hannah-Jones, Ibram Kendi, Ta-Nehisi Coates or whatever, and you're saying they fall short in one way or another, and you're black, then that act, whatever your intentions may be, has its own life. It has its own consequence in terms of the larger cultural dynamic. You authorize something, okay? Because no longer is it easily deflected, such a criticism or observation, by an imputation of racially unsavory motive to the speaker. If the white guy says it, if Bret Stephens at the New York Times decides to take after the 1619 Project, you can maybe kind of dismiss him effectively by saying, that his lack of wokeness is a kind of privilege of whiteness and a kind of reflection of his general lack of interest in the well-being of the people who have been oppressed, or his failure to understand the true resonance of the historical dominations or whatever. You can be, in a way, dismissive of him. You can put him down. You can shut him up. If he stands up in a meeting, I can imagine this happening at the New York Times. I can imagine, I used to be able to imagine it happening as it is now, given what has gone on.
They push him out the window.
Exactly. So now everybody has learned that lesson. Brother McNeil, whom we will talk about later, has learned that lesson, and they won't speak up at all. But if Charles Blow, God bless him, were to stand up in a meeting and he say, I think there might be something to this criticism. Well, he's not going to do that because he's Charles Blow. But if you and I were in the room for as long as we lasted, we might stand up and say something like that. It would completely change the conversation. Let me give you an analogy. You're the linguist, but I'm going to go on here about language for just this 1 minute. A bunch of men in the locker room talking about scoring. Okay. There are things that you can and can't say acceptably. You can't use the B word, even with a bunch of men. And, you can't, your reputation will be tarnished. You'll be, thought less of if you do. That's one thing. But if there's a woman in the conversation, a single woman present, that completely changes the rules of the game, which men are prepared to enforce on each other about what can be said, because the meaning of having said it in the presence of the woman is different than the meaning of saying it to a single gendered assembly. So acceptable speech is conditional on the social composition of the audience. Okay, that's the general principle that I'm advancing here. So in the national discourse, when you and I join the audience and voices as Black people that resonate with things that are unspeakable from the point of view of other Black people, especially if white people were to say it, we change the rules. We move the whole center of the conversation. We elicit responses from our audience that are indicative of a sense of liberation. People are saying, I feel now empowered that I can say things. In fact, they're saying that I couldn't have said before because I know that I'm not a racist when I say them, since I've heard you say the very same things. And that is what people fear the most. And that is what is infuriating to them. It's loyalty. It's a sense of betrayal. It's a traitorous role that we're playing. Either we're ignorant of it, or worse, we're completely aware of it and are nevertheless willing to go down that road. That's shameful. That is irresponsible. It is reckless. It is, et cetera.
And there's something else that was perfectly put, and it crystallizes something that I'm not sure people fully realize, or they think it went out with the Jeffersons, which is that a lot of Black people think, if you express the sorts of views that you're talking about as a Black person, that you are dog whistling to the hard right, that you are specifically, it took me years to figure out that people actually meant this when I started. They think that what you're doing is you're hoping to angle for high speaking fees with white audiences because white people want to hear these things. You're trying to line your pockets. And that's the way. They think that you're saying these things so that you can go out every 2 weeks and make $20,000. So they think that you're Uncle Tom. That term is relatively obsolete at this point, but it took me a while to figure out. A lot of Black people genuinely think that there's a such thing as a Judas who goes out and says things that they don't believe or only half believe because white people like it. And maybe for some reason you have a problem with Black people of some kind. Now, it's one thing to say, oh, that's ridiculous. But it's another thing to realize that whether or not it's ridiculous, there are a lot of people who genuinely think it. And it's interesting because so many people, including people with doctorates, are under the impression that that kind of Black person exists, this Judas figure. I think part of it has to do with the role of Christianity in the culture. You're Judas. So many people believe that you have to open up your mind to the possibility that maybe it does. And I would say that since the year 2000, like you, I've met all of the card-carrying Black conservatives and, spoken to most of them at length. I mean, you name it. Clarence Thomas, Ward Connerly, Larry Elder, Carol Swain, Shelby Steele, Walter Williams, Tom Sowell, Armstrong Williams. Those 8 are the ones that just come to mind. Known them all. Sat in green rooms. This is not bragging. I'm not talking about that I've known famous people. I'm making a specific point. You get to know all of these people. You hear them speak themselves out. None of them are Uncle Tom. None of those people are saying the things that they say because they want to line their pockets and please white people. It just doesn't work. They're all very different people. If anything, I would say that what all of them have in common, or had, if Walter Williams is no longer with us, but all of them are very confident people. The people who say these things, that they're not self-hating. They don't hate themselves at all. They're actually people with strong egos and strong intellectual confidence. But they're not Judas. I've never met this person. And I've always been kind of waiting. There are 1 or 2 of those people where I kind of thought, is this Judas? Is this person where if you kind of scratch the surface, you see that what he's really doing is a hustle? No, that person doesn't exist. And I think a lot of you listening to this know that. But there are a lot of other people out there who really think that that's what Glenn and I are. And if we are that, why would you want to come anywhere near us? So, yeah, that's a major issue. I do have to be prescriptive here. I wish that Black people would get past that Judas idea. No, that doesn't mean I don't like Black people. I'm not calling it a pathology. I understand where that view comes from, partly because it's spread so far and wide, including by college professors talking to undergraduates. But that Judas doesn't exist. I think I can confidently say that. That person does not exist among people who have our sorts of views. And yet there are a lot of people who genuinely think they've got it figured out and think that Judas exists and is talking to think tanks. So, yeah, it's a shame. I wish that strain would go away.